So on TikTok right now, there are several videos going around of teachers telling everyone how difficult it is to teach Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha is the kids born around 2010 all the way till 2024. Oops, I misspoke. They're the kids born from 2010 all the way till 2024.
I'm calling out all the parents. If you're a parent and your child is in pre-K to elementary school to high school, I'm calling you out. The children today, I have never experienced, and I'm 22. Having to teach and work with you guys as children has been the most traumatic experience of my life.
I am so over these students feeling like consequences are beyond them. I'm not understanding how when they do something, they don't understand the consequence for it. And I have never seen the level of disrespect I'm seeing right now in this group of kids this year.
The kids are different. The kids are 100% different. They're different. It is not October. It is September. I am not burned out until the second semester. Okay? Usually. That's when I approach burnout. Because we get Thanksgiving, we get Christmas, we get all these things. I am burned out. It's September.
I teach 7th grade. They are still performing on the 4th grade level. I don't care how you flip it, turn it, swing it, swindle it. They still performing on the 4th grade level.
I have seen several people say that Gen Z can't read. They are saying that a lot of Gen Z are illiterate. It is not Gen Z. Maybe it is the younger Gen Z, but not the older Gen Z. It is definitely a lot of Gen Alpha. A lot of Gen Alpha. And yes, I am Gen Z and I am deeply offended by that statement. It is the Gen Alpha, the kids born from 2010 all the way to 2024. These kids are struggling in school. In fact, there was an article that said reading scores for 13-year-olds are the lowest they have been since 2004. Since 2004. That was like 20 years ago. It's going to be 20 years ago next year. The kids are not okay. The kids are struggling in school. They can't read. And these kids, we always say kids are the future. Kids are the future. They are the future. If they can't read, what is the world going to look like? It's alarming. It's alarming. And I really want to talk about this today and kind of like peel back the layers and understand why we're here and what is going on and how we can help the kids. On top of them not being able to read, teachers are quitting their jobs. And a lot of them are saying they're not quitting because the pay is bad. We all know the pay is bad and it should 100% get better. But the teachers are saying that they're quitting because the kids are just different. The kids are disrespectful. Okay, kids have always been disrespectful, right? But they're saying that they've never seen anything like this. Like, it's worse. The kids are disrespectful to the teachers. The kids have behavioral issues. So a lot of teachers are struggling because they are spending 80% of their time managing the behavioral issues that these kids have instead of teaching. They already have to work overtime to do lesson plans, right? So on top of not being compensated fairly or being given a livable wage, they are working overtime to do these lesson plans, and then when they go to the classrooms to actually teach and execute the lesson plans, they can't even do that because the kids are out of hand. It's not just been one video of a teacher explaining what they're dealing with day to day. It's several videos. Like it's a lot of videos.
Do you honestly believe that these teachers are quitting their job 2 weeks into the school year because they're not getting paid enough or because the politics that they're dealing with from outside of the classroom is too much to handle? No, that's not the reason. The reason why they're quitting is because these kids are mean and they're making the classroom a war zone and they're getting zero support from parents at home and from admin on their campus. This 100% stems from the stuff that they have to deal with day in and day out from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. inside their classroom. It's the stuff that you have to deal with inside your classroom that makes you burn out and makes you never want to come back.
Right now, I saw another teacher from another school across the street from our school walking to her car this afternoon, and she looked like she could barely walk to her car. And I was like, we're almost to Thanksgiving, like, you know, trying to be friendly. And she was like, just unloaded on me. She's like, I've been teaching for 34 years. I have never had it this hard. What is wrong with these kids? Not in a bad way, but like, I don't know how to reach them. I feel like I'm one lesson that used to take a day is taking a week now.
86% of public schools are struggling to hire teachers. On top of this, public education has been underfunded every year. I feel like it's just getting worse. And I feel like if we don't start seriously having conversations about what is going on in the education system, then we're doomed. Because kids really are the future. Why is Gen Alpha struggling as a generation? Why can't they read? Why are we having a whole generation that might end up being illiterate? Who is to blame for this? Is it millennials because these are their kids? Is it the American education system that is getting worse and worse every year? Is it the 2020 world shutdown? What is it? Let's explore. So, of course, on TikTok, instead of us focusing on the problem at hand and why the kids are struggling in school and why they're not doing well, Gen Z and millennials are busy fighting. Gen Z is busy calling all millennials bad parents. Millennials are busy telling Gen Z that they don't know what it's like to be parents. And to all of that, I just want to say, how about we just come together, use our brains, and try and figure out the root cause of the issue. How about we stop all the generational fighting because it's stupid. It doesn't get us anywhere. How about we come together and talk about what's going on with the children and come up with a game plan to help them? Because we're talking about parenting and what it means to be a good parent, I just want to define what exactly that means according to psychologists and how a good parent can really impact a child and positively impact them. So, according to psychologists, they say that a good parent is someone who creates a nurturing and supportive environment while prioritizing connection, empathy, positive discipline, autonomy, effective communication, and self-care. So, I'm not a parent, but based on things that I've seen, things that I've read, and people who seem like they had good childhoods, like people who talk about their childhoods fondly, they usually talk about how they can talk to their parents about anything, they can rely on their parents. Their parents are emotionally stable. Their parents let them explore their interests. Of course, like the interests had to be, safe and like nurturing, nothing crazy, just their parents let them be themselves without shaming them, bullying them, tearing them down as a person, tearing their self-esteem. Basically, their parents built them up. Their parents invested in them as people. Their parents did not view them as an extension of themselves so that they could control them and make them become the same person the parent was. These people seem like they have self-autonomy, right? And the reason I'm talking about this is because when we want to understand why Gen Alpha is the way that they are, we have to look back generation by generation and see how we ended up here, right? So like, why are Gen Alpha, why do they seem more disrespectful than other generations? Why are they having attention span issues in school? They are having trouble following directions. They can't read. And reading is something that we all think is very basic, but it's really, really important because if you can't read, life is hard. Like, that's just the truth. Life is really hard if you can't read something, right? Because everything is written. Well, not everything, but a lot of things are written. A lot of things you need to read them to understand, right? Also, reading helps kids develop critical thinking skills. And without critical thinking skills, where will we end up as a society? So that's why it's alarming that the kids can't read. So back to what I was saying. If we want to look at how we ended up here with why Gen Alpha is acting this way, we have to go back in time and talk about previous generations and how they were raised, what their parents instilled in them, and how that is affecting us today. In terms of the definition that I just gave you of what psychologists think good parenting is, which again is a parent who prioritizes connection, empathy, positive discipline, autonomy, effective communication, and self-care. A lot of people who are now adults, a lot of people who are now older or old, they did not have parents who valued these things. They had parents who valued other things, and that affected them in a lot of ways. A lot of these people are walking around with a lot of internalized struggles, a lot of issues, a lot of trauma that they have not addressed, and it is affecting them in their daily lives. It is affecting how they're parenting their kids and how they view the world. I think we should look back at the two generations before baby boomers, because it might explain a lot of the ways that baby boomers are and why they act the way that they do and how they see the world, right? So a lot of baby boomers are the kids of two different generations. So the first generation that baby boomers are the kids of is the greatest generation, and the second generation that the baby boomers come from is called the silent generation. And when I first saw these two different generations, I was like, why is one called the greatest generation and why is the other one called the silent generation? What's going on? Basically, the greatest generation was born between 1901 to 1927, and the silent generation was born between 1928 to 1945. The greatest generation lived through the Great Depression, and many of them fought in World War II. The silent generation members are called the silent generation because they went through the Great Depression and World War II, which taught them to survive hunger, homelessness, fear, loss, and death. So we can see that these two generations are already traumatized. And I'm sure this really influenced how they parented their kids and how they wanted to raise their kids. Because the silent generation were children when they were going through the Great Depression and World War II, they tended to remain silent so as to not cause trouble. So their whole lives, they just felt like there was this instability and like anything at any moment could destabilize their lives. So they just learned to act in line and act accordingly so as to not cause trouble. And that is really sad. So when it was time for the silent generation to raise their kids, they truly, truly believed that children should be seen but not heard. Basically, what that phrase means is that they believe that children should be quiet and well behaved at all times by any means necessary. So the silent generation were parents of the baby boomers and Gen X. Baby boomers and Gen X are considered to be authoritarian parents. And by being authoritarian, I basically mean that these types of parents were preoccupied with their kids respecting their authority and really believed in traditional methods of parenting. These traditional methods of parenting usually involved enforcing strict rules that do not allow a child to grow into their own authentic self. Most times, these kids are forced to kind of like obey rules and kind of just do whatever their parents want because they live in fear. These parents use traditional methods of disciplining kids to keep them in line. If you understand what I'm trying to say, I am so sorry. If you don't understand what I'm trying to say, you had a good childhood. We all know now that corporal punishment doesn't really work. What it does instead is that it makes a lot of children who eventually become adults have a lot of anguish, have a lot of problems where they're not really able to process their feelings or emotionally regulate or just process things well because they weren't able to as children and they don't know how. According to the World Health Organization, corporal punishment is bad because it triggers harmful psychological and physiological responses. Children not only experience pain, sadness, fear, anger, shame, guilt, but feeling threatened also leads to physiological stress and the activation of neural pathways that support dealing with danger. The child will never feel at peace. They will always feel like they're on fight or flight mode because you never know what is about to happen, and that's not a healthy way to live. And a lot of these kids grow up into adults who are struggling in life just because of the trauma that they have endured in their childhood. And then they have to work through these things and kind of process everything and unlearn so much when these things just shouldn't have happened anyway. It's easy to look back now and say that it was wrong, but maybe like at the time, I guess they probably knew it was wrong and it would never work, but they just did it anyways because they didn't know how to do anything else other than that, because that's how their parents raised them. I don't know, that's usually the excuse, but still, even if it's an explanation of why people chose to raise their kids like that, I still think it's important to acknowledge the harm that was done. And I feel like a lot of millennials and Gen Z really struggle with the fact that their parents refuse to acknowledge what happened. Because a lot of millennials were raised by Gen X and baby boomers, a lot of them have stories and experiences, and they have spoken in great detail about how the traditional method of parenting, where their parents were just authoritarian parents with strict rules, really harmed them and affected them in so many different ways. And some of them are now in therapy, unlearning, unpacking, and navigating their trauma, which, is the consequence and the side effect of being an authoritarian parent. But also, I think it explains why a lot of millennials seem to kind of be struggling with how they want to parent, because on one hand, they don't want to parent the way their parents parented them because they have seen the harmful side effects of what it means to be an authoritarian parent, because they are living in that time. They're experiencing those side effects and those consequences. A lot of them are in therapy trying to cope with what happened to them, and so they don't want to do the traditional parenting style. They don't want to be authoritarian parents. So now that we have done kind of like a little deep dive into how each generation was raised and how they chose to parent their kids, I think we can now begin to understand why a lot of millennials are making the decisions that they're making when it comes to parenting.
It's wild to me that us millennials will lose sleep and cry for 3 days because we will yell at our kids a little too harshly / lose our shit on them. But our parents used to literally beat us.
One thing I noticed with millennials, we are the biggest group of people who are really obsessed with breaking cycles, breaking generational cycles. And because of our obsession with breaking generational cycles and not wanting to be like our parents, I think that it's caused us to go on the very opposite side, right? It's kind of like that all or nothing idea. It's either I'm going to be this style of parent, or now we're taking it to the other side. I'm going to use a terrible example. It's like the idea that, let's say you weren't allowed to grow up and eat candy. So the minute you turn 18, you decide to go to culinary school and you become a baker and you dedicate your whole career to candy, making candy and all that stuff. You live, eat, breathe candy. You went the complete opposite of a trauma response. It's I'm going to eat all the candy now. And we know eating all the candy is not sustainable. And here's a message to millennial parents. You can do everything your parent did not do, and your child can still walk away with trauma. Because trauma isn't necessarily always directly to everything the parent does and what they didn't do. And I get it. We do not want to be like our parents. And the reality is, I would say this. Think about all the parts of your parents that you are trying to reject. And even in doing so, how has that even stopped you in your parenting? Right? What are those parts of me that I've completely pushed away because I fear that it will harm my child, right? Because my parents maybe didn't have this level of awareness that I do, but you're operating on the more level of awareness than your parent did. So just knowing that is a way to offer repair to your kids instead of less preventing trauma.
From what I've heard and seen, a lot of people are making fun of millennials specifically for raising iPad kids. And I saw a TikTok video of a Gen Z person saying that when they have kids eventually, they will not raise them to be iPad kids. And this caused so many problems. A lot of millennials obviously got offended because the iPad kid generation is technically Gen Alpha. No other kids were raised with that amount of technology. I think having a whole generation of kids who are glued and obsessed with their iPads is a little alarming. Not a little, very alarming. And I think this might be the reason why a lot of them are having attention issues in school, where their attention span is just limited. Can you imagine when you're a kid and your brain is not even fully developed? You don't understand what's going on, and you're just glued to the screen. What does that do to your imagination and your brain? This girl that I met was telling me a story about how one of the families that she nannies for, their kid is an iPad kid, and that kid, compared to all the other kids that she nannies for, is so behind on so many levels. The kid is not doing all the little developmental things that kids should be doing, because anytime that kid is crying, the mom just throws an iPad in front of the kid. Like, that's crazy. That is insane. One mom who's a millennial even explained that she gives her kids an iPad when they go out to a restaurant because she doesn't want other adults to have a bad time, because it's for the good of everyone. It's for the good of everyone in the room. But is that good for the kid? There is actually a TikTok video that explains what I want to say very well. So I'm just going to play it for you guys, and then we can come back and continue this discussion.
Y'all are saying that Gen Z is making fun of millennials for raising iPad kids, right? I don't care if I'm a millennial teacher or not. I have to join in with Gen Z here and saying that y'all are raising some kids that are extremely hard to deal with. From a third party perspective, we're being called out for some poor parenting choices, and we just don't want to hear it. We always like to clown on boomers for not having any emotional capacity to take criticism because of their parenting choices, but y'all need to step back and realize that you're doing the exact same thing. I'm a millennial teacher that has taught millennials, Gen Z, and now Gen Alpha, and I can tell you that screen time and the lack of restrictions around screen time has 100% affected their academic performance, the way that they function in the classroom, and their social skills. A lot of these millennial responses to Gen Z calling out them raising iPad kids is them saying, well, you're not a parent yet. You wouldn't understand until you're in that situation. But y'all do realize that Gen Z are old enough to be having kids, right? They're old enough to be parenting, and they're seeing what they're seeing out in public. They're seeing how these kids are acting in the classroom. They're seeing how they're acting out on the streets, and they know that they don't want to have anything to do with that they're going to make different choices around screen time and iPads. I think I have a unique perspective because not only have I over a decade of experience in the classroom teaching hundreds of other people's kids and seeing the direct effects of screen time and addiction to screen time, but I'm also somebody who has gone all that time without having a child of their own and now is entering into parenthood at the tail end of that. And I can tell you that I'm making the decision that a lot of Gen Z parents are doing now. I'm not giving my kid unlimited access to screens because I know that it's going to stunt their social growth and it's going to stunt their academic performance. These kiddos have an addiction to screen time, and y'all have an addiction to screen time just as much as them because you know that them not having a screen in front of their face makes it infinitely more challenging to parent them at home and out in public. A lot of people talking about how and why they give their kid a screen out in public is not necessarily because they're making it an easier time on the kid, but they're making it an easier time on the adults around them. Is that you're sending them to school and pawning off that addiction on teachers. Because when we ask them to sit there and listen to instructions or complete an activity that doesn't have to do with technology, we can't get it done with them. And they are having complete meltdowns because they don't know how to function without having a screen in their hand. You're pawning that issue off on us.
The millennial mom who got offended by Gen Zers and other millennials making fun of parents who raise iPad kids basically went on to explain that when she was a kid, she was not allowed to express herself. She was not allowed to be a kid. She was not allowed to be bad behaved, or that would mean that she would get physically harmed by her parents. And this mom is still feeling the effects of this style of parenting to this day. And I truly feel for her. But I also don't think throwing an iPad to your kid to make them well behaved is in their benefit as well. It seems like in the long term it is harming them. Some millennials who are also criticizing millennials who are raising iPad kids think that because millennials had strict baby boomer parents, that millennials right now are kind of veering to the other end of the spectrum and just letting their kids do whatever, and they're not really exercising their right to be a parent. They're not really parenting them and teaching them, what is good or bad. they're not really disciplining their kids. Again, I am not a parent and I don't know what it's like to raise a human being. That is such a difficult task in every kind of way. At the same time, there's a reason why a lot of people, including Gen Z, are alarmed by the growing number of iPad kids who have been exposed to all kinds of media their whole lives. And now they have a terrible attention span. They can't follow directions in school. They can't read. They probably have no imagination, as someone said on TikTok. And this is really, really harming them. A lot of people also want to blame the 2020 shutdown. But teachers on TikTok are saying that this problem did not begin in 2020. 2020 just made it worse and helped us uncover the issue at hand. But the problem apparently did not begin in 2020. Even though I'm not a parent, I do think it's important for parents to keep up with their kids' education and how they're performing in school. Kids don't want to underperform in school. It literally is heartbreaking for you to be a student in school and not be performing up to par. Like it's heartbreaking. It breaks a kid's spirit. For a lot of kids, especially the kids who I know of, or students that I went to school with that I know were not performing well or underperforming, their parents were able to step in one way or another, and that really, really changed their lives. Their parents monitoring how they were doing in school and finding ways to help them, be it taking them to a tutor or sitting down with them and helping them do their homework, really, really made a difference to this kid's education. And it really helped, because the last thing I would want for a kid who is in school is for them to feel defeated and for them to feel like their spirit is broken, and then in turn they just give up on everything and give up on even trying, because that's how it starts. It starts with like one or two or a couple failed tests and no one is monitoring the kid, and then the kid just feels defeated, hopeless, and like they feel like they can't do it when they can do it. They just need support, they need help, right? Like we don't want to leave the kids behind. And I feel like if parents are not monitoring how their kids are doing in school, it's doing them a disservice. And that is how we're ending up here, where the kids can't read, the kids can't do math, the kids are struggling. They need support. I saw a TikTok of a girl talking about how she did not do well for one of her tests, one of those tests that you have to take in elementary school to see where you place in math. And her mom got really concerned when she saw that, and she put her in Kumon, and like this girl hated Kumon, but that really, really helped her. Like at the time she hated it, but looking back now as a college student, she's grateful that her mom saw what was going on and stepped in and helped her become a better student by stepping in that early so that she could excel in the future, right? And I know like not everyone can afford Kumon, that's a lot of money, but I feel like there's other ways to help your kid, be it that you sit with them and do homework with them. If you have a cousin or a family member who is good at a certain subject, tapping that cousin or that family member and being like, hey, can you help my kid do this, or can you help them figure this out? You know, like there's always a way. That is my take on this. It's important to remember always that the kids are the future. We need them. If they can't read, what kind of world do you think this is going to be? Like, I think the main takeaway of this video is that we should start making the kids read big novels again. Because let me tell you something. When I was like, how old was I? Maybe 5 or 6. I couldn't read. Like, I mean, I could read, but not really, because I had not been going to school for whatever reason at the time. And it was like a whole mess. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I just remember I couldn't read. And you know what happened? I had to switch schools, and finally one of my teachers noticed that like I was behind compared to all the other kids, right? And so every day after school, every day during break time, she would sit down with me and make me read. She'd make me read each syllable in those little Peter and Jane books, and we would sit there and read every day. And guess what? Because of that teacher who saw that I was struggling, I now like reading. I used to be an avid reader in middle school. I can't say that I am, but I'm trying to be one again. But I can read now. I can read scientific papers, scholarly papers, literature, anything you want me to read, I can read. And I don't know what would have happened to me if that teacher didn't step in. Just invest in your children. even though I don't have kids, invest in your children. They deserve parents who want to invest in them. Anyways, that was it for this video. I have to edit it, even though I thought it would have been like a straight shot, but yeah, I need to edit this video. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you liked it. If you hated it, also let me know. Maybe I can improve. But thanks for listening. Okay, bye.